Good afternoon, book lovers. It's Robert Boyd with another book report. This time I'm talking about a zine that I have a subscription to, King Cat number 80. This is my first subscription copy, but obviously it's been published for a while now. It's a comics zine mostly, and it's published and created by John Porcellino, a cartoonist who was born in 1968, and I saw him here in Houston a few years ago when he came and spoke at Domi, and I'll put a link to that in the post. And he said in his talk that he started self-publishing in college, but basically it was just for him and his friends. But then in 1987, he discovered Fact Sheet 5, and I don't know how many viewers will remember what Fact Sheet 5 was. It was basically when zines became a big thing in the 80s. There wasn't, the internet didn't really exist. I mean, I guess it existed for some government agencies, but it wasn't like as widespread as it is now. And to get zines, you had to pretty much know who was producing them and send them a check in the mail, and then they would mail you the zine. And Fact Sheet 5 was sort of a clearinghouse for all of that. Each issue featured hundreds of reviews of zines of all types, and the price and contact information for the publishers. And so for Porcellino, it just sort of meant, hey, there are people all over the world who are doing exactly the same kind of thing I am, and I can contact them. And he did. He started publishing King Cat in 1989, and I'm gonna do a little personal story here. I was, some 20 odd years ago, I was at a small press comics convention in Silver Lake, or not Silver Lake, Silver Springs, Maryland, called Small Press Expo. It's annual, and it's still going on today. I don't know if it's still in Silver Springs, but sort of in the Bethesda area. And I was talking with a bunch of people. We were talking about Porcellino because even then he was kind of a legend. We were talking about how early any of us had sort of stumbled across his work, because it's kind of an obscure cartoonist, and he's been publishing this thing for decades now. And one guy was super proud that he had discovered it really early, like on issue 7 or something, which is, if you're a true believer, that is kind of a mark of how much you are, that you discovered it before anyone else did. I realize it's sort of a rock and roll thing, but it's true with comics too. I'm kind of proud that I discovered Love and Rockets with issue 2. Anyway, this cartoonist was who said this was Joe Chiappetta, who was responsible briefly for a really good self-published mini comic called Silly Daddy. Anyway, the book signing that I saw him at, so he was publishing these little pamphlets, not really, hugely substantial in size, but eventually in the 90s he started getting, or it might have been early 2000s, I'm not sure which, he started getting book publishing, first with High Water Books in Boston, my friend Tom Devlin's ultra boutique small press publishing house, and also I think with a couple other people, but ultimately he's found his home at Drawn and Quarterly, which makes sense because Tom Devlin is now the publisher of Drawn and Quarterly. So he has a bunch of books out, and they're all good, and I highly recommend them. But he's continuing to produce these mini comics, and because he does deal with them through the mail, he decided to build his own small press distribution business called Spit and a Half, which is still a going concern as far as I know. And so he's a key figure in distributing other people's mini comics. And I want to read something he said when he gave his talk, because I recorded it and put it into my blog post. And it's about his vision of what his comics are. He was talking about how he was writing poetry when he became ill. And he's had a litany of illnesses. During this period, I was always writing poetry alongside my comics. And over time, the two started creeping into each other's territory. A lot of these comics were originally written on paper as poems, but that's tricky. I think they're comics. I don't think they're just illustrated poetry, because in the comics form, they work a little bit differently than they would as just as text. To me, comics are a form of poetry. Not in all cases, but I think they can be very much that way. Like a lot of cartoonists, I view comics as a rhythmic pattern. You're working with meter, you're working with words. The thought of making a comic is breaking up that expression into a way that it translates your ideas into meter. It very much has to do with things like meter and word choice and the location of words on the page, the way the words work with each other and within the panels on the page. Now, his art, as you'll see as I show you some examples, is very minimal, and you have to get past that. You got to assume that he's like a I don't know. He's like a contemporary poet who's basically pared everything out that isn't necessary, including the labor of drawing a really detailed drawing. So let me give you an example of a strip that to me reads like a poem. It doesn't have a name, but it's 2 pages, and it's 4 panels, so 2 panels on each page, and I'll show them to you as I read them. Sounds of pre-dawn birds in one ear, trucks on the highway in the other. Sounds of early morning birds in one ear, the junkyard in the other. To me, that's a poem right there, and just even the words by themselves would make it, a slight minimal poem. But then he's got the pictures too, and they are broken up like lines in a poem. And okay, so I'm going to do read another poem that has that quality. This one is about his mom, and his comic tends to be stuff about his life, including his relations with his wife and his family and so on. So, and like I said, I'm showing it to you showing it to you over here on my right, but on your left. So here's this poem. It was drawn on June 30th of last year, and he wrote it down on May 14th. So here it goes. I watched my mom asleep on the couch with 2 chihuahuas asleep on her. She was snoring. I watched her breath go in and out. I tried to imagine her as the girl with the smile getting kissed by the monkey in that photo from long ago. Time rises and time falls as we rise and fall. I love you. And now I'm going to show the photo of his mom and the monkey, which was a real photo, I guess. And then some of the strips are a little bit more conventional. They're less poetic, more telling a story, like this one called Gertie, which is about a woman who would give kids snacks in his neighborhood when he was growing up. And anyway, that's really all I have to say about John Porcellino. I think he's a great artist. I'm glad I subscribed to his zine after all these years, although I picked him up at various zine stores over the years. His zine is called King Cat, and you can order it and even subscribe to it from his website, Spit and a Half, and I highly recommend it. John Porcellino is a great American artist.